what does that leave us with from last night's debate on that particular point about tax?
Well, perhaps Giles and I should hereby pledge immediately that we're both going to demonstrate how to conduct a proper TV debate without rancor, without lies, possibly with a little bit of bias on both sides, but who knows?
Well, I'm certainly
from...
heavily prepped and drilled, and I plan to stick to prepared lines. And there'll be no ad-libbing. I've got my papers here. I've been told what to say, and I'm going to say it regardless of the questions.
No ad-libbing. I dream of that. Right, Edwina Currie, are the Conservatives on, in a bit of peril here? Because the thing that they relied on, it may have had, actually, the weird thing here, Edwina, is that it seemed to have a bit of an impact because Keir Starmer couldn't counter it straight away. So it sows the seeds of doubt in some people's minds. However, this morning, it turns out that this is not something that ministers should have been relying upon. So what's the net effect of that, do you think?
Oh, I think the net effect will be pretty well zero, because if you put into people's minds the fear that taxes, which are already pretty high, are going to go up, then you probably landed a punch, perhaps one slightly below the belt. Keir Starmer has said he won't put up certain taxes, but he hasn't ruled out putting up taxes altogether. And as the Prime Minister was pointing out last night, if you're going to start insisting on net zero, with people having to put in heat pumps and all that sort of thing, that's very expensive. And if you say, well, it's not going to cost people a lot more, then the money's going to have to come from tax. It's not that difficult to do. I mean, I actually switched off before the end, I will confess, because I got fed up with, well, I listened to about 50 minutes of it, and then I thought, no, bedtime, school run in the morning, more important. I got to the point where I got fed up with, my father was a tool maker, to which my response always is, so what? Your dad's not a candidate. And 45 seconds? What was that all about? Goodness me. It struck me as being very noisy, very aggressive. I thought Sunak actually came out of it very well. My head was a bit in my hands about whether Starmer could be Prime Minister when he is clearly not just dull, but a bit mediocre. I used to teach in a college of further education, and there was a difference between the very bright ones and the plodders who would get through and they'd do okay, and you'd be very glad to see the back of them, huh?
Well, Giles, what about performances, first of all? We'll maybe get to the format in a second. Who do you think came out ever slightly better? Because it doesn't seem that there was much in it.
Yeah, I know. It's depressing when you see that 51% thought it was Rishi Sunak. I'm fed up with seeing 51%, 49% every time with the British public. We deserve this. With that, we couldn't make up our minds on Brexit, and I can't make our minds on this. We deserve this debate, really, between these two men who were. And it's interesting. He shouts, my dad was a toolmaker, but no, what happens is he goes, my mom was a nurse, and then Rishi goes, my dad was a pharmacist. It's like this bizarre thing. They think, and I'm someone who everyone, whatever I do, man, your dad was an Alan Coren, your dad was a journalist. We live in this world. You've got to get away and let them be that thing. What they are is a barrister and a hedge fund manager, a lawyer and a bean counter. And it's fine. That is the world that we have provided for ourselves. And you can't expect charisma. Honestly speaking, Nigel Farage and George Galloway have huge charisma. They are both fascinating to listen to. Galloway much better, I think, a more brilliant politician. If we had a presidential system like you end up where you vote for the personality who's going to be prime minister, which we don't, you would have them. It would be riveting television. It's like having Trump. And one of the things I did think, and we're all down on them for their sort of shiny haircuts and their polish and their boringness. They are, compared to the debate that is going to happen in a couple of weeks' time with Trump and Biden, where Biden's got to stand in a hot studio for 90 minutes, not 60. These two men were at least in the prime of life. They're at least alive. They've got blood going through their veins. So, do you know what? My son, my 11-year-old son, was gripped by it. Now, whether it was just staying up after bedtime, because it was 9 till 10, But he played a cricket match. He got back late, and I said bath time. No, it's the debate. And they puffed it before by saying they're going to talk about the climate. And Sam said they're going to talk about the climate. So we had to wait, and the climate came quite late. And Sam was gripped. He thought it was the best thing he'd ever seen. Two adults arguing and shouting. He couldn't believe how they were behaving. He couldn't believe their rudeness. He thought it was brilliant. And let's face it, if Keir Starmer gets in, he's going to let 12-year-olds vote. So
I was going to say, there you are, TV for 11-year-olds. Edwina, what we are going to kind of broaden it out in a minute and talk more about the debate. But you switched off, and a lot of people have told us that they didn't like it, and they've told us what they were watching instead. Which is, I mean, maybe that's not everyone's going to watch it. It's fair enough. Why should they? Maybe they've already made up their own mind. But what would you watch? What would have you've said there 45 seconds was pointless. But if you had to just rip it all up and start again, what would you actually put on the TV?
Well, I would like Times Radio to be running it, because I think we might actually get a more intelligent approach generally. And no, I don't just say that because I'm on Times Radio. I think the time has come when the terrestrials should not have this iron grip on doing these debates. I think we have moved on from, 1970s, 1980s, when all of this was so novel. And I think it's about time that we thought about it in a different way. I must say, I'm looking forward to the 7 head-to-heads, which I think is on Friday. That's going to be a lot more fun, not least because we're likely to see the deputies of the 2 main parties. And then, of course, we'll have a lot of celebrity stars, 2 of whom you've mentioned. And it'll be much more entertaining, and it may indeed throw more light on some of the stronger topics like immigration. I think there'll be a much clearer division between them. I mean, part of the problem, I suspect, is that Starmer and Sunak put them in a room where nobody is listening and nobody's asking any questions or filming it. They probably agree with each other rather more than either of them would want to allow. They both recognise the country has got substantial problems, particularly after COVID, after Brexit, and with the war going on in Ukraine. And they both recognise that actually the government has extremely limited instruments at its command to do anything much about them. And so whatever you do, you're going to find that you cause problems elsewhere. So, for example, yes, you could solve the problems in the health service by importing an awful lot of more people, but then you're going to have complaints about immigration. Yeah. Plus, it's going to cost a lot of money, and you're going to have worries about taxes, and so on and so on.
But they're not honest about that, Edwina.
World.
But they're not honest about that. That's exactly right. We had Jonathan Ashworth on, and we were saying to him, you're either going to have to cut public services or increase taxes. That's the only 2 options when it comes to spending. He then said, well, we're going to grow the economy, which of course they're not going to do in the first 2 years, and they may never do it because no one's done it for the last 20. So they can't be honest. That's the other thing that comes out of these debates, that they're debating around a point, but that point isn't necessarily a truthful one. But maybe that's just naive to hope for something other than that.
Yeah, but look, Stig, somebody a very long time ago said we get the government we deserve. If we as an electorate prefer to have fairy stories, then what we'll get is dishonesty at the very heart and the very top of government, whoever is in power. We'll get people giving us fairy stories instead of giving us the truth. Everybody says they want the unvarnished truth from their politicians. No, they don't. The last thing they want is honesty. The last thing they want is to be told very firmly, as you have just said, you want better services? Fine, it's going to cost you. Where's the money going to come from? Put your hand in your own pocket and be willing to pay for it. It's a very long time since any politician actually said, I'm willing to pay for it. I think it was Barbara Castle when I was a kid. And she said that. And guess what happened at the next election? They lost it.
Yeah. So what's the answer to that, Giles? I think that seems to me no more than the immutable truth.
No, that is true, and they have to wriggle around those things. And the growth thing is the magic money tree they talked about with thing we'll make more money. I think we did learn more about the leaders. As we didn't learn, there's a tendency to make our judgments based on the first 10 minutes. When I started scribbling things down because I was talking to you, because I might write about it, and I thought this is rubbish, they're shouting, and I might stop. I was going to turn it off. Sam, no, stay. We've got to watch this, Dad. They're going to talk about the climate, right? And in the bath was getting cold upstairs, and then I say. After that halfway break, when they came back, we're going to talk about the climate after the break, and then they didn't. I think they talked about security before that. I started to think, as they relaxed a bit, particularly Keir Starmer, you started to get a bit more of a sense. When they are, what upset me, so in terms of what we learned, when they asked Rishi Sunak about the climate, finally I can take Sam to bed. Right, what's he going to say about the climate? And Rishi Sunak said this thing. All he talked about was Labour's going to make you pay for it. We're not going to make you pay for it. We know about your bills. And I don't mind that Rishi's rich at all. But you have this thing where this multi-millionaires being told about these things called bills that people pay. And the people are struggling to pay them, and they're called working families, Rishi, and we have to keep talking about them, and they don't like paying their bills. So, and he said nothing about the climate. He only said the Labour Party will make you pay for it. We're not going to make you pay for it. You've got to pay your bills. And I realised that he and the modern Tories have a vision of the British electorate as poor, hard up, short-sighted, don't care about the long term, old, they're shivering by their electric bar heaters, and all they care about is the money, all they care about is the food, all they care about is the school fees, and they have no wider vision. And I thought that was a mean and sort of venal projection of what the British people are. I think we're better than that, and I think the Tories talking down to us like that and thinking that all we're doing is scratching around for pennies behind the sofa and don't care about the future of our children. I think that's a massive mistake.
Because I suspect this is their core vote strategy, which I'm sure is not may even be untrue, may still be talking down to people, is that there's a certain bunch of people who just want the here and now. They're a bit suspicious of net zero and they need them to stay, otherwise they'll get annihilated completely. If you could change the format, Giles, what would you do? Does it matter? Because having 45 seconds where two people just shout over each other, it seems to be a bit pointless. I think Keir Starmer actually revealed, I know you're friends with him, but he actually revealed himself to me as not quite as sharp and as at it and as hungry and as lean and as intellectually nimble as I would really have expected him to be in a situation like that. I think maybe that exposed him slightly in that area. Could there be a better way of looking at this?
I don't say I'm not a friend of his. He just lives locally, and I suck up to him in the hope of finally getting invited to Chequers, which is I tried with Cameron. I tried with Boris. It just hasn't worked. I got really quite friendly with Jeremy Corbyn around the corner, and that didn't work. So no, I just think he's a nice man, but he wasn't trying to get that. Speaking as someone who I have done a number of pilots of game shows. I've ushered quite a few bad formats into their grave. I did a thing called 500 questions, and it was on ITV1. I got a big wedge. They put it on telly on that slot actually, stripped across a week. Nobody watched it. And we had a quick fire round, right? And we had all these different things, and these signs would go up. And on Twitter, as I watched my show just collapse before the world, on Twitter they were all going number wang. Do you remember? It was a thing. It was a Mitchell and Webb. Mitchell and Webb. There you go. The one who isn't my brother-in-law. It was a Mitchell and Webb number wang. And it was about these bonkers rounds you have. And whenever Julie Edgington would say, and it's now time for the quickfire question, and careful with the 45-second rule, I was thinking maybe there should be more things, like the mystery guest. Remember on Question of Sport, you play some music, you only see their bum and their elbow.
He wants to make it into a game show, Edwina. That's what it is.
Promising rounds. They say there's this round and this round. There should have been more. I think more rounds, more games, more stuff. Like on Crackerjack, when they used to make them try and pick a marshmallow out of a tray of then a tray of Rice Krispies, and they got it all stuck on their face.
Edwina, are you agreeing with this? What about the idea of the audience being able to shut people up or have a vote on whether they've answered the question? That sort of gamification. Would you buy that, Edwina? I'm suspecting you're not going to go the full Crackerjack here, but would you have a bit more audience response to these people?
I'm still trying to figure out what on earth Giles was talking about, and I'm obsessed with the notion that somebody who is really, really keen on the environment actually runs a bath for your child. Have you any idea how much more energy
She's got you there.
Than a shower?
Yeah. I want clean children who live forever, don't we all?
Fair enough. Right, listen, just finally on this, we have a young person has got in touch. She's WhatsApped us. Imogen is 23. She says, I stopped to wonder last night, why am I so excited about this debate? I realised shortly it was for its memeability. Oh. Do they realise this is about all the debates as they're formatted are good for? Got essentially nothing out of it other than a few laughs over text with my friends. I think Andrew Neil, presumably, is exactly right calling it superficial. Starmer is a laughing stock. Sunak just seems like he's looking down on us with every answer. I can't give you too much detail on policies. The little brains of the hoi polloi simply wouldn't understand it. But I promise you it's there. Utterly pointless, says Imogen.
So we'll put her down as a maybe as well with all of this. There's no obviously a good answer, but I think we all agree that it wasn't necessarily a good thing last night.